Someone asked your soulmate what they would say in their wedding vows. Their emotional answer brought tears. My beloved child. Someone asked your soulmate a question they were completely unprepared for. If you were standing at the altar with the person you truly love, what would you say in your wedding vows? At first, they smiled as though they could brush it off. But then something changed. Their eyes lowered. Their voice disappeared. And the people around them suddenly realized this was no longer an innocent question. Your soulmate was thinking about someone specific. They were thinking about you. But what brought tears into that room wasn't simply the thought of marrying you. It was the first sentence they finally managed to say after that long silence. They whispered that if they ever stood in front of you on that day, their first promise wouldn't be about loving you forever. It would be an apology. And when someone quietly asked what they needed to apologize for, your soulmate's expression changed completely. Don't skip, because the reason behind that apology revealed something they have apparently been carrying inside for far longer than anyone realized. Your soulmate admitted that there were moments when they knew exactly how deeply you mattered, yet fear convinced them to behave as though they were uncertain. They said they would look into your eyes and promise never again to make you question whether you were chosen. Then their voice began to shake. Someone sitting nearby reportedly stopped smiling because suddenly everyone could feel how personal those imaginary vows had become. Your soulmate wasn't describing some faceless future partner. They remembered tiny things about you. The way your presence could make an ordinary moment feel different, the silence between you that somehow said more than conversations with other people, and one particular memory they still cannot forget. But they refused to explain that memory immediately. Instead, they said something even more revealing. There was a moment when I almost told them everything. Almost. That single word changed the atmosphere. Because if they came that close to confessing what they felt, what stopped them? And why does your soulmate now seem to regret that decision more than ever? Then came the part nobody expected. Your soulmate said that if those wedding vows ever became real, they would make one promise they had never been brave enough to make before: they would stop allowing fear, timing, and other people's opinions to speak louder than their heart. Their eyes filled with tears before they could finish the thought. Someone gently asked, "Do they know you feel this way?" Your soulmate didn't answer right away. That silence was powerful because it revealed the painful possibility that you may not know the full depth of what they have been holding back. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. After several seconds, your soulmate finally admitted there was one sentence they desperately wished they could say directly to you, not someday at a wedding, not inside imaginary vows, but now. Yet just as everyone expected an ordinary declaration of love, they revealed that the sentence was connected to a private promise they once made about you, and almost broke. That private promise had been made during a moment when your soulmate believed they might actually lose their chance with you. Nobody else knew about it. They had quietly promised themselves that if life ever gave them another genuine opportunity to tell you the truth, they would not hide behind fear again. But when that opportunity appeared, something unexpected happened: they froze. They convinced themselves there would be another day, another conversation, another safer moment. And now, when asked about their wedding vows, that missed opportunity suddenly came rushing back. Your soulmate admitted that one of their deepest regrets was allowing you to walk away from certain moments without knowing what was really happening inside their heart. Then someone asked a question that made them completely still. If that person were standing here right now, what would you tell them first? For several seconds, your soulmate couldn't answer. Then they said they would tell you that some of the moments you may have interpreted as distance were actually moments of overwhelming emotion. They weren't always pulling away because they cared less. Sometimes they were afraid because they cared far more than they knew how to express. And then came another detail. Your soulmate admitted they had mentally rewritten those wedding vows more than once, even though no wedding had been planned. Different words. Different promises. But one line remained every single time: they would promise to protect the honesty between you, even when the truth felt frightening. Someone nearby quietly asked why that particular promise mattered so much. Your soulmate looked down again and confessed that there was still one truth about their feelings they had never managed to tell you directly. What they said next brought the conversation back to that unforgettable moment they had mentioned earlier, the moment when they almost told you everything. Your soulmate revealed that you had done something incredibly ordinary that day. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you would necessarily remember. But the way you looked at them, the words you casually said, and the feeling that followed made them suddenly picture an entire future with you. For one brief second, they imagined standing beside you years later, remembering that exact moment as the beginning of everything. Their eyes filled again as they admitted, "That was when I knew." But knew what? Someone immediately asked them to finish the sentence. Your soulmate took a breath, started to answer, then stopped. Because what they finally revealed about that moment was far deeper than simply realizing they loved you. What your soulmate realized in that moment was not simply that they loved you. They realized they could actually imagine choosing you again and again when life became ordinary, difficult, imperfect, and real. That frightened them more than they expected. Attraction was easy to admit. Missing you was easier to hide. But imagining you beside them years into the future made everything suddenly serious. Your soulmate told the people listening that this was why their imaginary wedding vows felt so emotional. They weren't searching for beautiful words to impress anyone. They were thinking about the promises they wished they had already shown you through their actions. Then someone asked, "So what would your most important vow be?" Your soulmate's answer came almost immediately this time. "I would promise that they would never have to guess what they mean to me again." And that was when one person in the room quietly wiped away tears. But there was another vow your soulmate hesitated to reveal. This one was harder because it touched the part of your connection they still blame themselves for. They admitted they would promise to speak when something mattered instead of retreating into silence and hoping you somehow understood. They would tell you when they were afraid. Tell you when they missed you. Tell you when something hurt. And most importantly, tell you when they needed you instead of pretending they were perfectly fine without you. Don't skip, because that confession led directly to a question nobody expected. Someone asked your soulmate whether they believed you had ever mistaken their silence for rejection. Their face changed instantly. They didn't need time to think. They quietly said, "Yes." Then came the painful admission. There was one specific time when they watched you react to their silence and knew you had misunderstood what was happening. yet they still couldn't bring themselves to explain. Your soulmate remembered your expression from that moment with uncomfortable clarity. They said part of them wanted to stop you, pull you aside, and finally say everything they had been swallowing. But fear won again. Now, imagining those wedding vows forced them to confront what that silence may have cost. Their voice became softer as they described what they would say if they could rewrite that moment. I wasn't trying to make you feel unwanted. I was trying to understand why wanting you felt so powerful. The room became completely quiet. But then someone asked the question that pushed your soulmate even further. If you could make only one promise to them before you ever reached the altar, what would it be? Your soulmate looked up, tears still in their eyes, and answered with a promise so specific that everyone suddenly understood they weren't merely imagining a future with you, they had already made a decision about what they wanted to do next. The decision was simple to say, but terrifying for your soulmate to actually follow through on. They said their promise would be this: before I ever ask them to trust a future with me, I need to give them the truth about the past. That sentence immediately changed the mood. Until then, everyone had been listening to beautiful thoughts about commitment, regret, and love. Now there was clearly something deeper underneath those vows. Someone asked what truth from the past could possibly matter so much. Your soulmate hesitated, then admitted there had been a time when they deliberately acted less affected by you than they truly were. They thought hiding their feelings would protect them. Instead, it may have convinced you that your connection meant far less to them than it actually did. And there was one conversation in particular they wished they could take back. Your soulmate explained that during that conversation, they had an opportunity to be completely honest. You may have said something that opened the door, perhaps without even realizing it. They could have stepped through that door and told you how deeply their feelings had grown. Instead, they chose safer words. Smaller words. Words that concealed everything happening underneath. What nobody around them knew was that afterward, your soulmate replayed that conversation repeatedly, imagining what might have happened if they had answered differently. I should have told them, they finally admitted. Someone asked, told them what? Their eyes filled again. They said they should have told you that your presence had already changed the way they imagined their future. They should have told you that losing contact with you frightened them more than they wanted anyone to know. But even that wasn't the confession that made their voice finally break. Your soulmate then returned to the wedding vows and said something nobody expected: if they ever stood across from you at that altar, they wouldn't promise you a perfect relationship. They would promise you something more believable. That when fear appeared again, they would choose honesty instead of disappearing behind silence. When misunderstandings happened, they would stay and speak. When life became difficult, they would remember exactly why they chose you. Then someone gently asked, and what would you want them to promise you? Your soulmate went completely quiet. For the first time, they seemed unable to control the emotion on their face. Eventually, they whispered that they wanted only one promise from you, and it wasn't about forever. It wasn't even about marriage. It was something they desperately needed from you before any of those things could happen, and when they finally explained why, everyone understood what your soulmate was truly afraid of losing. The one promise your soulmate wanted from you was unexpectedly simple. If they finally came to you with complete honesty, they wanted you to hear them before deciding it was already too late. They weren't asking you to erase the past or instantly trust every word. They weren't even asking for an immediate answer. They simply wanted one genuine chance to explain what their silence had never been able to communicate. Your soulmate admitted that their greatest fear wasn't rejection itself. It was reaching the moment when they finally became brave enough to tell you everything, only to discover that you had already closed the door because of what their earlier actions made you believe. Someone quietly asked, "Do you really think they would listen?" Your soulmate's eyes filled again. They said they didn't know, and that uncertainty was exactly why those imaginary wedding vows suddenly felt so painfully real. Then someone asked what your soulmate would say if they were given only 60 seconds with you. No carefully prepared speech. No time to hide behind perfect words. Just you standing in front of them, listening. Your soulmate took a long breath and said they would begin by admitting that you mattered during moments when they pretended you didn't. They would tell you there were days they wanted to reach out but stopped themselves because they feared saying too much. They would explain that certain memories involving you still return unexpectedly, especially when they imagine the kind of person they want beside them in the future. But then their voice softened. They admitted there was one thing they would never ask you to do: wait forever while they remained afraid. That sentence surprised everyone because it revealed something important. Your soulmate wasn't merely dreaming about wedding vows anymore. They understood that promises mean nothing unless their behavior begins changing before the altar ever exists. And that realization brought out the most emotional words yet. Your soulmate said, "If I ever get to make those vows, I want them to know I started keeping them before the wedding." The room fell silent again. They wanted honesty to begin now. Courage to begin now. Choosing you clearly, not secretly, to begin before rings, ceremonies, or promises in front of other people. Someone listening became visibly emotional and asked whether your soulmate was saying they were ready to finally do something about these feelings. This time, your soulmate didn't look away. They gave a small nod. But then they revealed there was still one obstacle standing between that decision and the conversation they desperately wanted with you. It wasn't another person, and it wasn't a lack of love. It was connected to something your soulmate believes you may have already decided about them, and they are terrified they may be right. Your soulmate believes you may have already decided that their silence was the answer. That every delayed confession, every missed opportunity, and every moment when they failed to step forward meant they simply did not care enough. And that possibility has been haunting them. Someone asked, "What if they've already accepted that you never chose them?" Your soulmate's expression immediately changed. They admitted this was exactly what frightened them, because from your side, the evidence might seem convincing. You could not see the conversations they had with themselves afterward. You could not hear the words they almost sent you, then erased. You could not know how often they wondered whether one courageous decision might have changed everything. Then your soulmate said something painfully honest. "I gave them reasons to doubt something I never doubted inside myself." That confession left the people listening completely silent. But someone challenged them with an even harder question. "If you knew how you felt, why didn't you show it?" Your soulmate didn't defend themselves. They said fear had convinced them that waiting was safer than risking everything at once. They kept believing there would eventually be a perfect moment when the words would come easily and nothing could go wrong. That moment never arrived. Instead, time kept moving, and the things they wanted to say became heavier. Then they returned to those wedding vows again. Your soulmate said that if they ever stood before you, they would never want to pretend the journey had been effortless. They would acknowledge the silence, the mistakes, and the moments when courage arrived too late. But they would also tell you this: you were never difficult to choose. I was afraid of what choosing you required from me. Someone nearby immediately asked what they meant by that, and your soulmate's answer revealed another layer. Choosing you, they explained, meant becoming emotionally visible. It meant risking an answer they couldn't control. It meant allowing you to see how much power your presence had over their heart. And that was precisely what they had spent so long avoiding. But something has changed now. Your soulmate admitted that imagining you eventually building a future without ever knowing their truth frightens them more than vulnerability does. Stay till the end, because what happened next shifted this conversation from imaginary wedding vows toward something far more immediate. Someone looked directly at your soulmate and asked, "Then why are you still sitting here talking about what you would say someday? Why not tell them?" Your soulmate froze. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then they quietly revealed that they had already started preparing exactly what they wanted to say to you, and the first sentence was not, "I love you." It was a confession about why they had waited so long. The confession your soulmate had prepared began with words they had apparently struggled to admit even to themselves. "I waited because I was afraid you would see how serious this was for me." Not because their feelings were uncertain. Not because you were easily forgotten. The opposite was closer to the truth. Your soulmate explained that once they acknowledged what you truly meant to them, everything would become real. They could no longer hide behind timing, circumstances, or unanswered questions. Someone listening asked whether they understood how confusing that silence may have been for you. Your soulmate immediately said yes. That was the part that hurt them most. They knew you might have spent time questioning something they could have clarified with one courageous conversation. And then they added a sentence that made the imaginary wedding vows feel suddenly different: "If I ever promise them forever, I first owe them the truth about why I almost let forever disappear." That statement brought another question. Someone asked your soulmate whether they would actually include these difficult memories in their wedding vows instead of speaking only about the beautiful moments. Your soulmate said they would, because they wanted those vows to be real. They would tell you that loving someone isn't proven by pretending mistakes never happened. It is proven by what someone chooses after recognizing those mistakes. They imagined looking directly into your eyes and saying, "I cannot promise I'll never be afraid again. But I can promise fear will never again make my decisions for me." Their voice reportedly trembled on those words. Then they described another vow: whenever you began doubting your importance, they would not leave you alone to interpret silence. They would speak. They would listen. They would make sure you knew where you stood. But one person noticed something unusual. Every vow your soulmate described seemed connected to correcting something they regretted from the past. So they asked the question nobody had asked yet: are these wedding vows? Or are these the things you wish you could tell them right now? Your soulmate couldn't answer immediately. Their eyes filled, and that silence answered more than words could. Eventually, they admitted the truth. Those vows had become a way of saying everything they were still afraid to tell you directly. Every promise contained an apology. Every imagined sentence contained a confession. And every picture of that future carried the same hope, that there was still Eno.